Hi, it's Bumble. Welcome back to my channel. I haven't talked about any reading material in a while. I think in terms of that, the only videos I've made were talking about some of the Zelda mangas, and that's about it. Or at least I know I talked about the Twilight Princess ones, which were fun to talk about. I do want to talk about more manga. That's usually what I read anyway. I'd like to talk about the Majora's Mask one next, because I ended up buying that a while ago, but at the time I'm recording this, still gotta finish the game, so that's gonna be a while. I have like several games I'm kind of juggling right now, and one that I might start a playthrough of soon, so there'll be a pause in that. But in terms of what was I gonna say? Like actual novels and short stories and non-manga reading material, I guess. I don't think I've talked about on here. If I sound a little tired or out of sorts or anything, I'm recording this the day I got back from my trip. I'm recording this right after the FNAF 2 video, actually. I'm a little tired. I was gonna go to bed, but I thought I have like 3 things that I read while I was away, and I'd like to just talk about those, and I can just get all those done now and save the movie reviews for later. These are all, I think, going to be pretty short anyway. I wasn't even sure if I was going to make a video on any of these. I didn't know if any of you would care, but I thought with what I read on my trip, I thoroughly enjoyed it and I had some opinions, so I thought, screw it, I'm gonna make a video anyway. It's been kind of interesting. I don't really read too much when I'm at home. I've mostly just been reading like various manga while I've been home. But when I go on trips, I end up reading like really well-known books or things based in really well-known books. It just kind of turns out this way. The last time I'd went on one of these trips, because there's like a little library that I'd been going to, or I'd had access to, I should say. It was a book that was like a series of different authors in one book were writing their own like kind of modernized adaptations of various Edgar Allan Poe stories. I don't remember what the name of the book was, and the funny thing is I saw it again too. It was really, really good. I could not put it down. I made a video on it, but it was on my old channel. It's gone now. But that was really good, and that made me think, okay, I want to do some more reading while I'm on my trip and stuff. And it was really cool. There's a ton of books available. I was on a cruise ship. I had a really teeny library. They have all kinds of stuff there. I even ended up, they have like a book exchange. You can leave a book there and take one back. So my mom left one that she had brought. She left like a bunch of books and magazines she wanted to kind of get rid of, and I took one of the books from the book exchange, and it was Treasure Island, and I have it in my bag. So I'm gonna read that and probably talk about it. But they also have books that you can just borrow there, and I read a couple. So some of them were just like collections of an author's various works, and I'd read like one specific story I was trying to find in the whole bunch. So I'm going to talk about those in the order I read them. So the first, well, in terms of like an actual book, the only one I like that was like a pretty good length that I read was Sense and Sensibility, which is going to be this one. And then I found The Haunting of Hill House, and that one's a short story. It's actually pretty short. It's like 8 chapters, and I read that, and then I found a really, really big book that was like, hey, here's all of Oscar Wilde's stuff. And I was like, cool. I've always been curious about his writing, because I know he writes a lot of like plays and stuff, and the picture of Dorian Gray was there, and I've always wanted to read that. So I got to read that specific story, and then I had to go home. I couldn't read anything else. And that was just when I found him. I've never read Jane Austen. I've only experienced her stuff through the movie adaptations, actually. In terms of movies, I'm just gonna go on a bit of a tangent about her work for a bit. I've seen the 2005 Pride and Prejudice movie, which I would love to rewatch again. So I feel like it took me a couple watches, but I feel like I finally understand the hype now. And Emma, there was, with Anya Taylor-Joy, there was a movie adaptation, I think from like 2020 or something. I watched Emma. I thought thought that one was okay, but Pride and Prejudice I really liked. I know that this seems to be like everyone's favorite, and there's other movie and TV adaptations of it as well, and I really wanted to read the book for that. Actually, I had the choice. I found both of the books in the cruise library. There was a copy of Sense and Sensibility. There was like one copy of it and then 2 copies of Pride and Prejudice, and I really, really wanted to pick Pride and Prejudice, and I think it was the shorter one, but I thought if I don't pick Sense and Sensibility now, I'll probably never end up reading it, and I was curious about it. Let me save Pride and Prejudice for later. So I picked Sense and Sensibility, and I am glad I picked it. I did enjoy it. And then I kept checking the library because I finished this book early, and Pride and Prejudice was not there until the final day, and I got to read like a couple chapters of it like an hour before I had to leave the ship. But I do want to track it down. I do want to read it. I'll like, I don't know, see if I can find it at like a library or somewhere. But yeah, Sense and Sensibility, I'm glad that I read it because it was pretty good. I think from what little I've read, though, I do kind of like Pride and Prejudice. It's like a little, Pride and Prejudice is like a little easier for me to understand. And it's a bit, I don't know, like the format of it and stuff, but this was good. There's probably some things I read. I did kind of skim through certain parts, not like the whole book. I was reading, but there's just, it's something I kind of struggle with books a little bit. I don't know if this is gonna sound weird, where it's like an author will spend like several, I know it's a thing that authors do, obviously, they'll spend several pages describing things, but I think it's because, you know, this is like an older book and stuff, where it's already sometimes hard for me to understand the language anyway, of things. I'm trying to think of how to say this, but so it's like that plus like pages and pages and pages, like a little too long for me, of descriptions of things, or like really, really long conversations between some of the side characters, not the main characters, but some of the side characters, that I just didn't really care much about, so I kind of skimmed a little bit through those parts, and I was kind of reading through it. I wasn't just trying to, you know, like go through all the pages and stuff, but I did skim here and there. But yeah, it was good. I didn't take notes throughout the entire book. I didn't actually do that with any of these. I was only starting to write notes with this one once I finished the book, and it was just, it's not really even like specifics. It was when I was like towards the end, and I just kind of wanted to talk about my general thoughts more than really, really specific things, I should say. This is like a bit different from how I do my movie reviews. So this is going to be a bit short in terms of my notes, a bit more generalized, I should say. But yeah, I did the notes only when I finished the book, and it was the same for the other ones as well, for the most part. A lot of my notes I actually, for some of these books I'm going to be talking about, I wrote on the plane ride home, so I didn't really have anything else to do, and I didn't want to start Treasure Island yet. But I'll talk a little bit about what's this is about. But yeah, because I wrote my notes at the end of the book, if there's some things I like get wrong or I was kind of misremembering and stuff, I just want to give that heads up. This wasn't me writing like as I was reading or anything. And I was kind of skimming through like Wikipedia a little bit before I started this, just to see, okay, how much of things in my notes did I get wrong? I got the ages for one of the characters wrong, and I didn't realize. I wasn't even off by that. I was off by like a year, but I just realized that. But yeah, this story, it's about, because I didn't know anything about Sense and Sensibility from like movie. I've never seen any movie adaptations. I didn't know what it was about at all. I just was a Jane Austen book, and I'm like, good enough for me, I'll read it. I didn't know this was like the first of her like full-length books and stuff, because I guess there's 4 of them. There's Sense and Sensibility, and then it goes Pride and Prejudice. There's another one, it's called like something Park. What is it called? It's Wait, 6 novels, not 4? The reason I thought it was 4, it's called Mansfield Park, and then there's Emma. Yeah, I I thought there was 4 because whatever copy I was reading, which this is what the front cover of it looked like from what I read on the cruise ship. Whatever copy this is, it had this, like before the book actually started, it had this really long introduction. They had like an entire section that was just on like Jane Austen and her life, and there was like a chronological list of like events that happened in her lifetime and the stories she wrote, which was kind of cool actually to see like the specific years she wrote stuff, and it was like all this extra stuff at the beginning before the story started. But I swear it said something of like 4 novels. It was those. I don't know if I'm gonna read all of them. I didn't really care for the movie adaptation I watched of Emma. I feel like story-wise I didn't really like Emma, but maybe the book will be different. But yeah, Sense and Sensibility, it's about these 2 sisters. I was kind of confused, I'll be honest, between the 2 of them, which one was really supposed to be the main characters. Their names, well, there's 3 sisters. They're named Eleanor, Marianne, and Margaret. It's just kind of weird though, because Eleanor and Marianne are like the 2 main ones, or the ones that the story is really about. And there's a 3rd sister named Margaret. I assumed that she was the youngest. She's not really in it, though. I was kind of surprised she was even there at all. She shows up, like, a little bit in the story, but she's not in, like, the same location as the others. I think she's, like, sent to live somewhere else. She's, like, barely ever mentioned. I kind of forgot about her until she was mentioned at the end, where they say something of, like, oh, she's finally old enough to start dating now, or whatever. And she like comes back from wherever she had been staying for the whole story. So I completely forgot there was 3 sisters, but the ones the story focuses on are named Eleanor and Marianne. Eleanor is the older one. I think she's 17 if I remember correctly, and Marianne, I'll be honest, I was kind of confused on her age, because I remember at the beginning of the story her mom says like something about her being younger than 17. So I thought she was like 15 or something. I mean, I know Wikipedia is wrong about stuff. I have it like opened as well just so I can kind of remember some of these things. She's actually supposed to be 16. I feel like that makes sense. And because she ends up getting married at the end, and they mention about she's 19 now and she's married and stuff. So yeah, she's pretty young, so I guess she's 16. Eleanor, it does not say in here, but I thought she was 17. But yeah, it was confusing me throughout the story, because I knew that Eleanor was the older one and Marianne's the younger one, but I did not know how much of an age gap there were. I assumed, just based on how the characters were and their interactions with each other, that there was like a larger age gap. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, there are these 2 sisters and their dad dies, so it's them and their mother, and they end up having to move away from their home, and they end up having to stay with like some of their mom's relatives and stuff, and there's all of these other side characters, these like other families that live in the area, and they both end up falling in love, but then end up handling it very differently, where there's this guy that Eleanor likes named Edward, and it seems like they're becoming a bit of a thing, and then it's believed he's like dating someone else, and Eleanor's going through like her own private heartache, and at the same time that's happening, her sister Marianne is falling in love with this guy named Willoughby, like really, really, really falling in love with this guy, but then he ends up having to like supposedly leave her forever, and like is not planning to come back, and she ends up completely miserable. So it's like Eleanor is like secretly going through this pain about this guy Edward, but she's not telling anybody about it, and at the same time her sister at the same time her sister is falling in love. I'm getting the timing wrong. It's like one of them's falling in love and the other one's miserable and is hiding it and is like having it to help the other one and stuff, and then it sort of gets kind of switched around later. So this one is about these 2 sisters and like the people that they fall in love with basically. I'll kind of go through my notes, but there was some stuff I was like kind of confused about. There's this whole thing with Willoughby. He's the guy that Marianne ends up like really, really growing close with, spending a lot of time with throughout the novel. And they have this thing where he ends up seen with someone else and suddenly not really trying to return Marianne's like affections or anything, and then he ends up having this scene with Eleanor. I think it's when I was kind of getting more, I feel like I was getting more interested with the story like towards like because it's divided into like three, I don't want to say acts because it's not a play, but it's almost like, 3 volumes. It's in 3 volumes. I think by like the second or third, I was kind of getting the most invested. It felt like a little bit slow with the first volume. There's this part in the 3rd volume, I believe, where Willoughby is telling Eleanor, he ends up going to see her. Marianne ends up getting sick. I'm like very much jumping around a bit. And he ends up saying like, yeah, I was not actually in love with your sister at all, even though she was head over heels with me. And I was only just kind of pretending for fun, kind of being a dick, honestly. But then it's this thing where he ends up having to marry someone else, I think more for money than for love, and it kind of seems like the end, like a part of him actually did kind of love Marianne after all, and was kind of sad to hear that she ended up getting married at the end of the story. It was kind of confusing because like when the characters originally find out that like Willoughby is with someone else other than Marianne, and Marianne is like completely heartbroken, and the characters find out sort of, that he was kind of just using her and stuff. They're like super pissed at him, but then he kind of explains it much, much later, and then they kind of just feel sorry for him. I thought he was an interesting character, but I kind of wasn't really expecting that. And then there's this other guy, the person that Marianne actually ends up with, named, what's it? I keep wanting to say Colonial Brandon. I know this is like an older story. I don't really know age caps with like when people used to get married, and when did this take place? Okay, yeah, it's set in the late 1700s. Okay, I feel like that kind of explains. I just wasn't really sure. Yeah, this was written in the early 1800s. Okay, that's part of the reason I wanted to get in the Wikipedia page. I was just curious, because, there's this guy named Brandon, Colonial Brandon, and he's 35, and he falls in love with Marianne. I knew she was, like, in her teens, and I thought, oh, that's kind of weird. Yeah, she's, like, 16, so she's younger than I thought she was, and he's 35. I mean, he does turn out to be, like, a really nice guy, and I know times were different then, but, like, viewing it from, like, not from the 1700s, I'm like, oh, it's kind of icky. But he's the person that Marianne ends up with. He seems like a nice guy and stuff, and the characters definitely talk about that a bit more, like, towards the end of the story and stuff. I think what makes it was hard for me to, like, kind of believe in his romance with Marianne is that they don't really spend much time together. Like, he meets Marianne, like, towards the beginning of the story and stuff, and Marianne thinks that she's a very, like, emotional, energetic character. Her and her sister Eleanor are really, like, opposites, where Marianne is very kind of emotional, and she believes that, it was kind of funny to me to read that, like, the person she ends up falling in love with should be someone that has the exact same interests and beliefs and everything as her, which doesn't really sound fun for a romantic relationship, but whatever. She believes it's someone that should be very similar to, like, how her personality and interests are and stuff, and she's originally just like, oh, this guy seems, too old for me and stuff. But yeah, she meets him at the beginning, and then she ends up meeting Willoughby, and she spends a lot of the novel with Willoughby. What was I going to say? Oh, I forgot that whole thing too. Yeah, part of the character's thinking Willoughby's kind of a scumbag. There's this girl, her name's Eliza. I wasn't really sure her relation to Brandon wasn't at first, but now I'm reading that she was his ward. Was someone that Willoughby had tried to be romantic with and then just like abandoned her and stuff. I had completely forgotten about that. I think it was just like dating people for their money and stuff. I'm trying to remember. I'm looking through the page. That's why I'm kind of slow right now. One of the characters, Marianne, ends up falling, I think twisting her ankle or something, and one of the love interest characters ends up meeting her that way and picking her up and carrying her home. And I thought, oh, okay, that's an interesting way to meet someone. Yeah, it's okay. That's when she originally meets Willoughby. I was gonna say, yeah, I understand why she ends up falling in love with this person immediately. I was trying to remember which one it was. It was Willoughby. Yeah, that just picks her up. Like, she meets this stranger and he happens to see, and just picks her up and carries her home. And I'm like, yeah, if someone did that to me, I'd probably fall head over heels for them too. But yeah. Anyway, she falls like madly in love with Willoughby throughout most of the story, and she ends up so heartbroken from him not returning her messages or anything, and just basically like ghosting her after a while, that she ends up getting really sick because of that, and spends like the third act, like a lot of the end of the story, really sick. And then that's finally the point when she like Colonial Brandon starts like visiting her and stuff, and they end up spending like a bit more time together. And even from the beginning, he was already in love with her, and she's like sort of going closer with him. But anyway, my thing with their relationship is they don't really spend a lot of the story together. It's mostly just like Marianne and Willoughby, or like falling in love with him, or Marianne spending she's with Eleanor for a lot of this story and stuff, because it's really about like both of them. So yeah, it's hard for me to kind of root for like Brandon and Marianne's relationship when they're like barely like spending time together throughout this whole thing. So when they end up together at the end, I was surprised by that. If anything, if I thought Brandon was going to end up with anyone, I actually was guessing like, oh, maybe it's going to be Eleanor, because I mean, Eleanor towards the beginning of the story, she's interested in Edward, and then is going through her own like heartache and stuff about him ending up with someone else. Yeah, with Lucy. I forgot about that. There's like a whole twist with that too that I want to talk about as well. And then, I mean, Brandon, you can tell, and the characters can tell throughout the whole story, is like in love with Marianne, but he spends a lot of time talking to Eleanor. It's mostly talking about Marianne, which was kind of funny, but he spends a lot of time talking to Eleanor, and Eleanor seeing like, hey, this guy actually is a really good person and stuff. So I thought if he was going to end up with anyone, I assumed it was going to be Eleanor. I didn't think that Marianne was going to fall in love with him, so yeah, I was kind of surprised by that. And yeah, Marianne and Eleanor are interesting in this too, where Eleanor, it felt like a lot of the focus was on Marianne. It almost kind of felt to me like, I do say now that I finished the book that Eleanor is like the main character, really. But it kind of felt as I was reading that like Marianne for like the first half of it was like the main character and stuff, and then felt like kind of for the second half that definitely there was a shift and it was Eleanor being the main character. But yeah, I'd say it's Eleanor pretty much through like the whole thing. Now that I'm done. But what's interesting is even with that second half I'm saying, where you can really tell like, yeah, the focus, we're like definitely following Eleanor's perspective from here on out. Even though she's the main character, the story throughout the whole time felt like it was about Marianne. It was kind of really weird that way. where just the narration and everything was constantly talking about Marianne and Eleanor. I felt really bad for Eleanor as a character, where it's, you know, she ends up really sad about Edward and doesn't tell her mom or her sister about it and like suffers through it in silence, while at the same time hearing about like Marianne falling in love with Willoughby, and then Marianne ends up heartbroken and is like complaining to her sister, and her sister's still like sad about Edward and all of the other characters. Like there's this character, I think if I remember right, her name is Mrs. Jennings, who is like, yeah, Mrs. Jennings. She's always, because the Dashwood sisters, they end up staying with her for a while, and her and some of the other characters everyone's thinking that like Eleanor's gonna end up with like Edward or something, and Eleanor's like, yeah, sure, you know, because she knows she's not, but she's hiding it. And eventually she does tell all of this to Marianne. It's like Marianne ends up getting sick, and when she finally gets better, it's like a big thing at the end of the story. Eleanor finally tells her like, hey, for most of this I was like going through my own stuff, and Marianne is just like, whoa, that's crazy, why didn't you tell me about any of this? And feels really bad of like, here I was complaining to you and being really sad, and you were going through your own stuff and I didn't even know. It's like a whole thing. But yeah, I felt bad for Eleanor, because even like Marianne ends up, you know, getting really sick. I didn't really know what it was. She, like a specific illness she gets sick with as I was reading, because the way it's described, the way Marianne talks about it, it sounded like she gets so heartbroken over Willoughby that it causes her to get sick. I thought it was just like the stress of it, but I'm like reading on here, apparently it's putrid fever. I don't know what that is, but she gets like really, really sick, and then Eleanor is like constantly worried about her and having to take care of her, and Marianne is feeling like shit and is asking for her mom, and that's one of Brandon's like big actions at the end of the story. If he volunteers to go and get Mrs. Dashwood and brings her over, and then finally when Mrs. Dashwood's there, she tells Eleanor like, hey, you've been awake with your sister this entire time and being her caretaker of being sick, you need to just go. And Eleanor's like basically being told off to go and finally, you know, rest for a while and stuff. So I felt really bad for her in a way, or it's not really like pity, it's, I mean, she's, you know, she can't help it of like caring about her sister, and that's a good thing to have. But I thought, I mean, they both really go through it throughout the whole story. And I mean, Marianne is the one that ends up getting really, really sick by the end and stuff. But I feel like, in a way, Eleanor almost suffers more, I guess. And I guess it's more in a way of, like, she's the one that's suffering, but, like, none of the other characters really know about it or anything. Or she's, like, constantly worried and concerned about her sister, especially because Marianne just kind of says whatever she wants, and Eleanor's the one that knows she has to be very, like, you know, being polite to people and following societal rules and stuff. So she's kind of an interesting character to follow in that way. I just wish there was a bit more from her. I wish she was like a little bit more, I don't know, I wish there was more to her than just like her feelings towards Edward and a lot of her thoughts and stuff being about her sister. I don't know, maybe a little more energetic, but I mean, it is a good balance between the sisters, where it's like Eleanor is like the responsible, kind of more modest, quieter older sister, and Marianne is the younger sister that's more energetic and kind of just says what she wants. I don't know. Let me see what else. There's a part towards the end, I still remember it too. It was like the day before yesterday, and I was reading this section in the third act. I was sitting with my mom, and I'm around all these other people and stuff, and I was trying to be quiet, but there was this part, I'm gonna mention what it was. I'm not kidding, I literally gasped out loud because I was surprised, because Edward, there's this character named Lucy Steele, and she ends up supposedly like going to marry Edward, or they end up married or something, and then it turns out, just because of the wording of some things and the characters didn't really know, that Edward, he has a brother. That's not the big thing. He has a brother, and the brother is the one that actually marries Lucy instead. So then Edward is, at that point, because everyone gets like a happy ending at the end of this, basically, in some way. And Edward, he isn't with Lucy anymore, and his brother's the one that marries Lucy, and Edward, at that point is free to marry Eleanor, and is saying about how he like loves her and stuff. And I gasped at that. There's like a part where Eleanor finds this like letter, or she finds out about it in a letter of, because it was just characters being referred to their last name as a thing of, Edward, I don't remember what his last name is, but he's going to Mr. So-and-so's, married to Lucy, and then Eleanor gets told later of, oh, no, you're assuming it's Edward. It's not Edward. It's actually the brother that marries Lucy, and it's like a surprise to Eleanor, and it was a surprise to me that I haven't like verbally gasped at anything in a book in like a while, so it was kind of funny to me. But yeah, Edward and Eleanor, they get together at the end. I thought that was nice. Yeah, everyone ends up getting a happy ending in some way. It's funny to me that like Edward and Eleanor, and that's part of the reason I'm saying I felt like she was the main character all along, and it took me a while to realize that. Her and Edward, their sort of happy ending of getting married and all of that, and their life after marriage, is like, I'm kind of making up the numbers a little bit. It's like 5 pages or something, and then when Colonial Brandon and Marianne end up together at the end, which is after that, it's like 2 pages. It almost feels like a footnote, if anything, where it's like you're getting described all this stuff about like Eleanor and Edward, and then it says at the end of their little bit of like, oh, their only thing that they're wishing for now is for Marianne and Brandon to get together and get married, and then it says how they get married. Everyone wants them to get married, and they do, and then they were happy at the end, and it's like, that's it. It's just funny to me, but almost a little annoying, because like throughout the entire story you're hearing about, even though it's like you're following Eleanor's perspective for a lot of it, it's like you're constantly hearing about Marianne. I was kind of getting a little bit tired of Marianne in that sense. You're constantly hearing about Marianne and the people and her love life and stuff. So then she finally ends up with Brandon at the end, and then it's just like, okay, they're together and that's it. And it's like, really, after all of that? Let me see. What else? You don't hear from her much, but Eleanor and Marianne's mom, I liked as a character. There's this part I liked at the end of the story when the mom is talking in private to Eleanor. I think some of the other characters leave the room, and the mom's like, okay, finally I can talk to you in private. And she's saying about how she had been talking to Colonial Brandon, and he told the mom, like, oh yeah, I'm in love with Marianne. And the mom was like, he says that he loves her, and I know that because he admitted it to me or whatever. And she goes in this whole little thing about how she approves of their romance and stuff. I thought it was sweet in a way of, I mean, I don't think they needed the mom's like official, you know how that's like a thing and stuff of like someone needs like a parent's permission to be with some. I mean, that's a thing in this one too as well, because like especially with Edward's mom, I forgot about that. She or wait, was it Edward's mom or was it Willoughby's mom? It's someone's mom that's like very controlling of one of the romantic relationships in this, and gets really upset about it. I know Edward's mom, I think there was this whole bit about like Lucy marrying the younger brother and how Edward's mom had felt about it and stuff. Where I think the brother ends up, the mom just basically like disowns him, and Edward goes back to her to apologize. She got upset about him trying to marry Lucy towards the beginning or something, and there's this little sentence that says something of like, oh, Mrs. Fears, yeah, I think her name is Mrs. Fears, or Ferrars, something like that. She lost a son. No, she, yeah, like lost a son and then gained a son, or whatever. It's sorry, it's like already almost 11. I'm a bit sleepy, having trouble kind of getting my thoughts in order. But yeah, I liked that scene of the Eleanor and Marianne's mom. I was gonna say the mom, and I'm like, wait, which one? There's like multiple moms in this. The Dashwood sisters' mother, because they're named Eleanor and Marianne Dashwood. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. You know, she gets to show up at the end, and you get to hear her thoughts on some of the romance stuff. But yeah, I liked that part. I liked the part when Eleanor is finally telling Marianne of like how she's been feeling throughout the whole thing, and there's like 4 paragraphs or something. It's like this sort of long bit where like Willoughby is giving his like big grand apology and explanation and stuff to Eleanor. That I was like really invested in that, actually. But yeah, that's like my notes, my general thoughts. I feel like it was kind of all over the place. I feel like this wasn't very good. You know what, I'm gonna post this anyway. I wanted to talk about the story. But yeah, this was the first of several things that I ended up reading, and I liked it. I'm glad I took the opportunity to read it, because again, I mean, maybe in the future I would have eventually read it, but like the physical book was there, and I thought, yeah, I need something to read while I'm on this vacation. Not that the vacation sucked or anything. I had a great time, but I needed to read while I was like having little drinks and things and just having some downtime and stuff. So I'm glad I picked this, because I was going to read Pride and Prejudice at some point anyway, so I can still do that. And now I'm done with Sense and Sensibility, and it turned out nicely, because that one was written first. Not sure if I'm going to read all these in order, but I might just end up reading Pride and Prejudice and stopping there, honestly, because I didn't really like Emma, and I don't really know anything about... What did I say it was? Not Mansfield Park. Mansfield Park. I got it right. Yeah, I don't know if I'll read it. I've never even, like, heard about it or anything, but maybe it's good. The only thing I knew about Sense and Sensibility was that there was a 1995 movie where Emma Thompson plays one of the characters, and I was kind of curious about that. That's the cool thing with all the things that I've read. They all have film adaptations in some way, and now that I've read Sense and Sensibility, I feel like, okay, I can watch one of the movie adaptations, but I like Emma Thompson, so I guess I'm gonna go with this movie. I'll have to find it somewhere. That would be cool to see. There's actually a lot of Jane Austen film adaptations. It looks like, I'm just going off Wikipedia, I'm just kind of talking here. It looks like the ones that get the most adaptations is either Emma or Pride and Prejudice. It's like at least three of Emma. Might be more, actually. Yeah, no, there's like 3 of Emma and 3 in Pride of Prejudice, one of which is from 1940, actually. I don't know why there's so many Pride and Prejudice. But I've only seen the 2005... Wait, there's a 2004 one? And it's Bollywood? Okay, I gotta check that out. But yeah, I've seen the 2005 one that I constantly hear about. I know there's also a TV series one with Colin Firth. I think it's on Hulu. I wanted to watch that at some point. Yeah, and I've seen Emma 2020. But yeah, there is one, at least I'm seeing listed on... No, there's two. I'm sorry. There's two of Sense and Sensibility. One of them is a TV drama from 2008. But I'm going to watch the movie with Emma Thompson. I hope... It's from 1995. I hope that's good. I don't even know which character she's going to play, but I'm curious now. Yeah, hopefully that's good. You'll get a review of that probably. Heck, I'm recording this a little in advance, so you might even just get that review the same day as this book one. But that'll be kind of nice. Like, I read the book, and then I'll get to watch a movie adaptation. Maybe that'll make some things from the book make more sense to me, you know, in a different format, visual format and stuff. Yeah, sorry this review is kind of all over the place. I'm a bit sleepy. But it was a good book. I'd recommend it. I'd like to check out more of Jane Austen's work. Even if, like, Pride and Prejudice, even if I never heard of it and it didn't exist and there was just only this and some of her other stories, I think I'd want to check it out anyway. But I guess I'll go in order at this point. I really want to read Pride and Prejudice. I do want an excuse to watch the movie again. So yeah, plus I read a little bit of it already. I was enjoying it. The chapters are very, very, very short. And then we'll see in Mansfield Park. I don't know. But yeah, that's my thoughts on this. It was good. Glad I finally got to read at least one of the Jane Austen novels. And see you next time.